Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. I am joined with Rob Dawson from the ESPN. Rob, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, we've got loads to get into. Just this morning, there was some breaking news that I originally thought it was a fake interview from Bruno Fernandes, which was apparently done in the international break. It's caused a lot of shockwaves throughout the United fan base, probably to the United ownership as well. We've got Kobbie Mainoo to talk about, we've got Ruben Amorim to talk about, we've got the dressing room to talk about, and just Manchester United's current form, where they're heading under Ruben Amorim. We all know Rob is a big fan of the manager.
Not a big fan, but probably more of a fan than lots of United fans.
Yeah, I mean, you've backed him quite a lot, and I think it's good to be able to see different perspectives and to be able to look at Ruben Amorim and see the positives with him as well as, you know, some of the drawbacks. So we will get into it, but I want to start off with Bruno Fernandes because there was some very interesting comments. I mean, essentially, if you've not seen them, Bruno Fernandes has come out and said that he felt like the club wanted him to leave in the summer, but they didn't have the courage to say, you know what, go, we're going to take the money, and doesn't feel the loyalty from Manchester United that he's shown to them. He also hinted that it's frustrating that he cares so much about the club, but there's players around him that don't care the same way he does, sort of having a dig at the ownership, but also his dressing room as well, which is very unlike Bruno.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get into with that. The first bit on his future, I think he said that he felt like he was being forced out or the club didn't want him to stay. Well, that's completely the opposite to what he said in an interview with the Manchester reporters a couple of weeks ago. He said that Ruben Amorim wanted him to stay and he felt the club felt the same as well. So a couple of weeks ago he was saying that he felt the club did want him to stay, and now in an interview that's come out in Portugal, it was done in the international break, settled by the Portuguese national team, he said that he felt that they were forcing him out a little bit. So he's not been particularly consistent with his message on that. United's stance with Bruno all along was that ultimately it was up to him. You know, there are some players and some situations where United will say, we're not going to contemplate selling that player. With Bruno, it's a little bit different because there was pros and cons to it, that he is one of United's best players, but the money that was being offered, or that United felt would have been on the table from Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, they felt could have been reinvested in the squad. So instead of making a set decision, they had said to Bruno, well, if you want to go, you can come to us and we'll talk about it. And that never happened. You know, Bruno never agreed with Al Hilal. He decided he wanted to stay at Man United after conversations with Ruben. He said in that interview with the Manchester Pack reporters that he felt the same commitment from the club and decided that he wanted to stay. Now, if he felt that he wanted United to outright rule out that he was going to go, you know, he's a midfielder who's the wrong side of 30. That's just not going to happen, particularly with the stage of rebuild United are in. You know, I think a lot of United fans were torn last summer when all that stuff came out about whether they wanted him to stay or go. Because obviously he's a massive miss because he's United's best player. But also £100 million for a rebuild is quite a big deal. So there were pros and cons to that. In terms of the dressing room stuff, I think it's probably the dressing room stuff that's going to be most problematic for the club, because essentially you've got your captain suggesting that some of the players in that dressing room aren't as committed to the cause as he is. Now, Bruno again will tell you that he's always available. He's played injured multiple times. He never cries off. You can say what you want about his quality on the pitch and on the ball, but his commitment to the cause I don't think can ever be questioned. And I know you in particular have said a number of times like how impressed you are about how committed he is, whether he's playing well or playing badly. Is that the same? Can you say the same for every single Man United player in that dressing room? Probably not. Now, that's one thing for me to sit here and say that as a reporter. It's another thing for a fan to say that because they're entitled to their opinion. It's another thing entirely for the captain of the football club to come out and say that. So I think the transfer stuff will probably make the most headlines. I think the most problematic thing really for Ruben Amorim and the club is that he has had a little, or he appears to have had a little dig at the dressing room and some of his teammates.
I wonder how that will go down because, I mean, I actually agree with what he's saying there. I think, you know, Bruno Fernandes, he is Man United's best player, but he does have bad games, he has bad moments, everybody does. But like you said, he's always 100% committed. He will always give everything. What you can never criticise is what he's given on the pitch. And, you know, no player is going to have a perfect game every single game. It just doesn't happen. But I think if we had a squad that every single one of them put the same effort levels in and had the same commitment that Bruno had, we'd be in a much better position. So I understand where he's coming from, and I personally think it comes from frustration that he is the best player, that hasn't been maybe surrounded by the quality he would have wanted, but also not only that, he's maybe putting so much into it and he's not seeing people around him doing the same thing, and that can be frustrating.
Yeah, and I completely accept that. And ultimately, his job as club captain, a big part of his job is to raise standards. Now, for all we know, he's probably a number of times in the dressing room said the same things to his teammates. Now, if he feels that that's not landed in the way that he wanted to, the only thing that's left to him is to say it publicly. Now, it's up to the individual fan whether you think that's right or wrong to do that. Some fans will say everything needs to be kept inside the dressing room. Why are you making more problems for the club and for Amorim? Because he's no doubt going to be asked about it the next time we speak to him on Friday before the Villa game. Other fans may say, well, if he's captain of the football club and his ultimate goal is to win as many games as possible, and that he thinks the way to raise standards in the dressing room is to publicly call out a few players, then that's also a valid opinion. When I look at that sort of stuff, as great as it is for us and for journalists, and the fact that we're sat here talking about it, it's great content for all of that sort of stuff. I do think that some of that probably deserves to stay behind closed doors. And you've got a similar situation with Erik ten Hag and Jadon Sancho. There's a lot of criticism of Erik ten Hag the way he handled that, because he brought something that was private into the public domain and made a massive deal out of it. Ruben Amorim may be looking at those quotes and that interview and thinking, well, something that could have stayed behind closed doors now is an issue for me, because I'm going to have to answer questions about it before that Villa game.
Yeah, I mean, and also something I picked up from it is he mentioned not only could he have gone to Saudi Arabia this summer, and he was kind of bigging up Al Hilal and the weather and everything, but he also mentioned that he could have gone beforehand as well, and he said he won't mention the club, but he would have won a lot of trophies that season if he would have gone. So it feels like maybe something that he's been deliberating over for quite a few years now. Yeah,
I mean, there has been stuff in the past about his future. I mean, there's been links with Bayern Munich, there was links with Real Madrid at one point. There have been different clubs who have been interested in him, and it's only natural because he's been probably United's standout player since he arrived. I don't think that, well, from what we know, I don't think it ever reached a point where United had an offer on the table and they had to decide whether they wanted to let him go or not. But again, it's only natural that there are going to be clubs interested in Bruno. And like you've said there, the one thing about Fernandes is that he's very, very ambitious. And we said in the interview with the Manchester reporters a couple of weeks ago that he does want to win things. He wants to win things at Man United. He thinks that he can do it here. But ultimately, if he can't do it here, then he is going to go on somewhere else and try and do it and win trophies, because I imagine he looks back at his Man United career, and as big as an honour as it is to be captain of the club and to be the figurehead of such a massive brand, he probably looks back and thinks, well, I probably haven't won as much as I thought I was going to do. He probably came in thinking he was going to win an awful lot more than what has he won an FA Cup and a League Cup. It's not an awful lot really, that, for a player who's put so much into it like Bruno has. So, again, it's only natural that he may be looking elsewhere and thinking, well, I haven't got that long left in terms of a professional football career. Where am I going to win trophies? If it's not at Man United, he's going to have to move on and do it elsewhere.
Do you think he'll leave next summer?
I think the stance from United is the same as it was last summer. I think that they will leave the decision up to him. Now, in that same interview that he gave with Manchester reporters, he left the door open. He said that there's been no conversations about what would happen next summer. He said he would leave it till after the World Cup. He certainly didn't shut it down and say, I had my chance to go, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying at Man United. He did leave the prospect open. I think what will happen is that United, at the end of the season, will have a conversation with him and say to him, it's up to you. If there's a big offer that comes in, it probably is not going to be 100 million quid again from Al Hilal, but if there's something in that region, we would consider it, but ultimately it's up to you to decide whether you want to play your football. I think if he decides he wants to go, United will allow him to go, because it's the same situation as it was last summer. There are pros and cons to it. Again, there'll be lots of Man United fans listening to this going, I can't imagine a Man United without Bruno Fernandes in the team. There'll be other Man United fans thinking, if it's 80 million quid for what is he, 31-year-old midfielder with a couple of years left on his contract, you've got to take it, because there are other areas of the squad that could use that money. So I think it is going to split United fans a little bit, and that is part of the problem that United as a club have got. It's not a situation where they've got this fantastic player at 22 years old and they're saying, hands off. We're not letting him go. We're building our entire future around this player. Bruno is at an age now where you are going to have to consider it. And the message we've got from United is that they're not looking to sell him. They're not actively trying to push him out the door. But if they were to get a sizable offer next summer for a player of his age, then because of where United are in terms of their rebuild, you'd have to consider it.
Yeah, and from his interview, it kind of comes off as if he wanted them to be like, please stay, we really want you to stay, whereas they're in a position where, and I understand their position. As much as I rate Bruno as a player, there will be a Manchester United without Bruno one day, and it's not as if he's in his prime years. He's still doing really well, and there's also that other conversation of, me personally, he's doing well this season, don't get me wrong, and you could even see, in that Bournemouth game, again, he's coming in clutch in important moments for Manchester United, but I think his best position is further forward.
Oh, I do.
And he's being played in the midfield, and that's the area where everyone keeps saying United need midfielders, and it's like, well, where is his position? Because it's not going to be in the number 10s. Ruben Amorim's ruled that out. He's too good to leave out the team. He's got to play, but is his best position the midfield? A lot of Man United fans would argue it isn't, so there's that question as well.
No, yeah, and I actually don't think that Amorim wants to play him in that position. I think that he would much rather play him higher up. Ruben Amorim can see what a lot of the fans see, that Bruno Fernandes is far better on the ball around the box. The problem Amorim has got is that he doesn't have many midfielders who want to get on the ball and are mobile enough to get up and down. Bruno really is the only one. And you can afford to have him there in that deep line midfield role because you spent money on Cunha and Mbeumo to fill those two number 10 roles. I think in a perfect world, Amorim would have Bruno as one of his number 10s, but the situation that he's dealing with just won't allow for it. And he's lucky that Bruno is adaptable enough to play in a number of different positions. We saw him in that FA Cup game that when they beat Liverpool under Erik ten Hag, where he was playing at centre half at one point and still played well. He's just that type of player. So I think his flexibility kind of maybe counts against him a little bit, but Ruben Amorim will know that his best position is higher up the pitch, but the situation he's got in terms of the midfielders he's got at his disposal just doesn't allow for it. And at the moment, he has to play in that deep line midfield role next to Casemiro.
That brings me on to my next point, which is Kobbie Mainoo, because, I've looked through your previous reports as well, and you've suggested it, and other people have suggested it, that if he continues to have like a lack of game time, he might look to move on, and that is what's looking like the most likely right now. Amorim's system's one that doesn't really suit Mainoo. I know he played it in the Euros, but the thing is, Bruno's got to play, and where does Kobbie go? And that's a question for Ruben Amorim. He doesn't seem to fancy Kobbie Mainoo in that midfield. No,
I think that's a fair assertion from watching how much game time he's had since Amorim came in. I don't think that the system particularly suits him. I think, in my mind, he's more of a number 8, and that position doesn't really exist in that system. You're either a 6 or you're a 10. And I think Kobbie can do a job in those positions. I just don't think either particularly suit him, and that's maybe why he slipped down the pecking order a little bit. I think it's pretty clear that he wants to go. There is a little distinction between him wanting to go on loan and wanting to go permanently. I don't think there's been any suggestion from him or his camp that he wants to go permanently. He's a Man United boy, Man United fan. I think he feels and sees his future at Man United, but in the short term, he's just not playing. And I imagine in the summer he would have been thinking, I want to be in that World Cup squad with England, and at the moment it's looking highly unlikely. From United's point of view, again, the message from United has been that this isn't a situation where a player is completely frozen out. It's not a Tyrell Malacia situation where he's not going to play, he's barely on the bench, he's only on the bench to fill in the numbers. Every time Kobbie Mainoo has been fit, he's been in the squad, and he's an important part of the squad. He might not be an important part of the first team, but he is an important part of the squad, and United can't allow players to go who are part of the squad because someone needs to come in and take his place. And if there are a couple of injuries, and it doesn't take much or many injuries for that squad to be exposed because it is so thin, that you can't be in a situation in the middle of February where, I don't know, Casemiro and Ugarte and Bruno maybe pick up knocks, and all of a sudden you're playing academy kids because you've sent Mainoo on loan to Napoli. What I think United will do is wait until the end of the window, wait until they get Ahmad back and Mbeumo from AFCON, see what kind of shape the squad is in. And if there are loan offers for Mainoo at the end of the window, look at it and assess it and have a conversation with him about where he sees his future. I don't think it's a guarantee that he'll be allowed to go, because if he leaves, they need to replace him. And I think that's going to be really, really tough for him to do in January. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening with him, because I actually think that it's probably more likely that he goes in the summer than it is in January. As much as Kobbie Mainoo will be pushing to go in this window, because he desperately needs games. I think that's pretty clear. You know, not just to get into the World Cup squad. He's 20 years old. He needs to be playing regularly. You know, what's happening to him right now is no good for him. And, you know, I think everyone can kind of appreciate that. But you do need players on the bench. You do need players in your squad who can come in. At the moment, he's down the pecking order. He's not playing as much as he wants. I just don't think that United will be that inclined to grant him his wish to go, because, you know, essentially you still need a squad of 20, 21, 22 players. It can't just be about an 11 playing every week.
Yeah, and do you know what, for me as well, I take on everything that you're saying there. I really like Kobbie Mainoo, the way he plays. I was so excited when he burst onto the scene. Yeah. And you do always have like a little bit of a soft spot for academy graduates.
Yeah, of course.
And, you know, he is Manchester United. You've seen them pictures of him when he was like, you know, like so little with the United kit on, and it makes you sad, like what's sort of happened to him, because his career has been stunted in this moment in time. Obviously, no one's got a God-given right to be playing for Manchester United week in, week out, and the manager, you know, will decide who's going to be starting. But because there's a lot of question marks over Amorim at the moment, whether he's going to be able to be successful, his win record, etc., I think there is certain fans, and I would put myself in that bracket, that's thinking,
I appreciate that.
I don't want to lose someone this talented when this time next year it might be a different manager playing a 4-3-3 and he's perfect for a midfield three.
No, I appreciate that, and you know, I completely take that point on board, and the point that, you know, if United were winning every week with the same 11, it's very, very difficult for a player to get into that 11. Mm-hmm. United aren't winning at the moment, so why are you not making changes? Again, I completely accept that. All I would say with Kobbie Mainoo, as talented as he is, has he come on as a substitute in games where you felt, oh my God, he's been absolutely amazing, he has to start the next week? Can you think of a game where you thought he's been absolutely unreal in that 10 minutes or 20 minutes?
No, but I think it's really difficult when, one, you're playing a position where it's quite hard to fully put your footprint on a game in that amount of time. Two, some of his cameos have been so short. And three, oftentimes he comes on for Casemiro. He's not...
Yeah.
If he was going to go on for anyone, really, it would be Bruno's position that suits him the best. It's like even yesterday in the Bournemouth game, I think that's the best we've probably seen him play in a cameo this season. I thought he did really well. I mean, came on when it was 3-2, ended up 4-4. Still frustrating draw, but some really good bits you saw from him, like gluing the defence to the attack. But I was watching from the stands, I was like, oh, just get a bit further forward, because, you know, I know how good he can be in the opposition's box, but because he's playing the Casemiro's position, he's watching the runners, he's having to sit deep. I think you get the best out of Kobbie when he's further closer to goal.
No, and I do think it is tough for him, in fairness. I mean, we saw the other week, you know, Pep Guardiola made 10 changes to his City team against Bayer Leverkusen, and they got beat 2-0 because none of them were in any kind of rhythm. And that's kind of the situation that Kobbie's in. It is difficult to chuck him on for 20 minutes here and there and go, right, go and impress everyone. Because football doesn't work like that. You know, we might be training every day and every week, but until it's like proper match situations, you don't get into that rhythm, especially a player like Kobbie, who's kind of that metronome figure in midfield who wants to keep the ball moving and, keeping everyone involved. It's important to be in that rhythm where you're playing regular minutes, and he's just not getting it. So he is being chucked in at the deep end. I personally think that he could probably be doing more in the time he gets on the pitch to make a point to Amorim that he just can't be dropped the next week. But I accept that it is tough for him because he's just not playing enough. And also, you forget how young he is. You know, it does feel like he's been around for quite a long time because he came through under Erik ten Hag. He did win that FA Cup against City. He's been to the Euros with England. You kind of feel like maybe, you know, in our heads, maybe it feels like he's 24, 25. Well, he's only 20 years old. You know, there are an awful lot of academy graduates who haven't played first team football at 20, so he's still learning himself. So it is a tough situation for him. I just think it's tough for United as well because you can't have players come into the office and going, right, I want to go, and go, right, fair enough, you're allowed to go. It has to be good for Kobbie, but it also has to be good for the club. Ultimately, as Amorim has said a load of times, the club has to come first in situations like that. What
do you think United's stance on it? Do you think they'd be open to selling him? Do you think they'd think about, maybe some pure profit there? Or do you think they maybe have the same view as what, you know, some United fans do, where that could be a bit of a bad luck if he goes and he goes on to do really well and then Amorim isn't successful.
I think the PSR thing comes into it because of the, you know, the homegrown pure profit kind of thing. I think it probably becomes more an issue than it perhaps would have been 10 or 20 years ago when you're looking to sell academy graduates. I think, you know, the way that the financial system is set up at the moment, United have a duty to look at big offers for academy graduates. That said, I don't think there's any kind of willingness to actually sell him permanently. I think that there's a possibility that they may consider looking at loan offers at the end of the January window. But I think they're probably in your camp that, you know, he's an academy graduate, he's an England international, he's the exact type of player that United should be building their entire team around. And the danger for United is that while, you know, maybe right now he's not playing, then they could go and accept 50 million from Chelsea. What you can't have happen is having him being Chelsea's midfield for the next 15 years and he turns out into this unbelievable talent. United will be well aware of that, and it's a different situation between him and someone like Garnacho or Rashford. Mm-hmm. With Kobbie, because he's so young, you actually don't know what he's going to be yet. And he's English, which makes a difference. He's obviously a local boy, which makes a difference, particularly to United fans. And I think he will be treated slightly differently. I don't think there's any willingness from United side to accept permanent offers.
Well, let's see what happens with Kobbie Mainoo. Quickly, before I move on to the next topic, what do you think about his brother's T-shirt? Free Kobbie Mainoo.
I think it's utterly ridiculous.
Do you? Do you think it must be difficult for Kobbie and Amorim on how to deal with that?
Will you answer me this? What benefit has that done for United or for Amorim or for Kobbie?
Nothing.
Well, there you go. It's utterly ridiculous. You know, completely appreciate a brother's desire to protect and support his brother, but do it in the right way. Do it behind closed doors and privately. You know, the situation is difficult as it is, and I can completely understand that his brother is looking at that situation and going, I really wish that Kobbie was playing more. I completely get that. If he was my brother, I'd be thinking exactly the same thing. But he's done him absolutely no favours at all. You know, he got such a great reception when he came on against Bournemouth. The danger is that he doesn't get that reception the next time, because United fans will go, well, if that's your opinion and that's what your family member's going to do, we're not going to support you in the same way. People had the same issue with Alejandro and his brother, and it went completely the opposite way. You know, I think as of right now, Kobbie himself has handled this perfectly.
He's been so professional.
He stayed quiet. He's been professional. He's trained really well, apparently. You know, every time that Ruben has been asked about him in a press conference, there's been all these quotes. Kobbie's never really, you know, bitten with any of that stuff. He's just kept his head down, and now he's got this to deal with. And what's going to happen now is that Ruben's going to be asked about it on Friday before the Villa game, and his tone might change because Kobbie's brother has landed him in a little bit. I think stuff like with this, it might seem inconsequential, but it's optically, it's terrible. You're standing at Old Trafford in front of everyone with a free Kobbie Mainoo T-shirt on as a family member. It's just, you've just done your brother no favours at all.
How do you think Amorim deals with that? Because Mainoo's not done it himself, and he might not have even known about it. I mean, he might have, but there's no way that you could be like, oh, well, I'm punishing you because your brother's done this, surely.
I think when it comes to Friday, Amorim will laugh it off because that's the kind of character he is. Mm. But I think when he got back into his office last night and he saw the pictures, he'll have gone, are you joking? And you would have every right to be. It's a difficult situation for Kobbie, it's a difficult situation for the club, but it's also really difficult for Ruben as well to navigate that situation. Mm. He knows full well that there's a lot of support for Kobbie. He said it loads of times, hasn't he? He said, I know you guys love him because he's English and he played in the Euros. He knows exactly what he's dealing with. Mm-hmm. The last thing he needs is more external noise caused by a player's family member and piling more pressure back on the club and back on Amorim. It's just not helpful.
Do you think it shows a lot about Amorim's character that he's not kind of bent on that? I know he gave him quite a big portion of game time yesterday, which was actually very nice to see, and I thought it was the right move, to be honest, in the game. But he's had so much pressure from the media, from you in the press conference, from fans, like us on here, to play Kobbie, and he's not bent on that. Do you think that shows about his character a little bit?
A little bit. I mean, the one thing I would say about Amorim is that he wants to win games.
He's not doing a good job at that.
But he wants to, that's a fair point. But he's not in the habit of punishing players just for the sake of punishing them. He sees these players every single day. And he gets to his office on Friday before a game and goes, right, what is the best team I can pick to win this game at the weekend? Mm. it's the same with the academy players. You know, there's a lot of calls for them, you know, to promote academy players, or why have you not given Shea Lacey a go? He's not trying to make a point with any of this. He's trying to win football matches. And I think at some stage you do have to trust Amorim and his staff that he gets to see a lot more than we're seeing. And we're seeing them for what, an hour and a half every week, and he's seeing them for 2 or 3 hours every single day. If he thought that Kobbie Mainoo was right to win a game, he'd put him in, and he hasn't. So you kind of got to trust Amorim a little bit that he knows more about that than we do. I kind of get the point though. I mean, you just made it there yourself that they're not winning regularly. So if that team isn't winning regularly, then you should be changing it. And I completely get that. Again though, Ruben isn't in the business of trying to like shoot himself in the foot by picking the wrong team. He wants to win games. At the moment, he doesn't feel like Kobbie Mainoo is the right player to win him football matches. The same with Shea Lacey, the same with all the academy graduates. When the time comes where Kobbie Mainoo is the right player to play, he'll play.
Well, let's see if he plays in that Aston Villa game on Sunday, because Casemiro isn't available. He might go to Guy and Bruno again, you never know.
Well, he could do. I mean, that would be a bit of a slap in the face to Kobbie Mainoo, but because I think Agati the last couple of weeks has fallen even further down the pecking order than Kobbie Mainoo. We saw a couple of times in the last couple of games he's brought on Kobbie ahead of Agati. I just don't think Agati's playing particularly well, and to throw him into what will be a difficult game against Villa at Villa Park, I mean, that would be quite a show. A show of faith in Agati. I would expect it to be Mainoo, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Agati.
I mean, let's see what happens with that. And just off the back of that, actually, how did the comments go down inside the club about, because there was a big reaction from the fan base about the, you know, Cheeto, Harry Armas mainly, you know, Collier, when he kind of used them as examples of him playing youth players and them maybe not going on and doing as well as people might have hoped, even though Harry Armas is doing pretty well. Yeah,
I mean, I think part of that is him trying to offer context to what happened in the Premier League at the end of last season. You know, that stat that gets chucked at him a lot about, what is it, 14 wins in 42 Premier League games or something like that, is obviously not a great stat. But there is context around that. And you look at the teams that he had to pick at the end of last season against Brentford, Wolves and West Ham. You know, had Chido Obi, Harry Armas and Tyler Fredrickson playing in all those games. And now he's making the point that Chido Obi isn't really training with the first team anymore. He's back with the academy kids. Harry Armas is on loan at Sheffield Wednesday, where I think he misjudged that comment. He is doing relatively well at Wednesday, but the point is he's playing in the Championship. Tyler Fredrickson hasn't really been in and around the first team despite playing at the end of last season. So I think he was kind of making a point about the context of that Premier League record a little bit. Again, you know, he will tell you that in terms of the academy, it was made very clear to him when he came in that part of his job is to promote academy players. But I think he's been a little bit disappointed by the quality of some of those academy players. You know, again, say the same thing as I said with Mainoo. If there's a player that really catches his eye from the academy who comes and trains with the first team and he thinks, oh my God, like he can make a difference for me on a Saturday, he'd be in the team. At the moment, I don't think that Ruben feels like there's that kind of player in the academy. And he has said a couple of times that he feels like there needs to be changes with the academy to get players up to a level that he can start to use them. And I think the club as well, I mean, you know, the club's academy has gone through a lot of changes, and it is going to take a lot of time to bring players through to the right level. I think Amorim would love to include more academy players in his squad. At the moment, he just doesn't feel like the right level is there, and that's really not for him to solve. That's for the guys in charge of the academy to solve. You know, hopefully in the next couple of years, we will see a wave of academy kids coming through who are at that level. At the moment, I think if Ruben was sat here right now, he would tell you, if he was being completely honest, that the level of the academy is not where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that Manchester United needs to look at, because of course it's a huge part of the club's DNA, and
there are changes that are being made. I mean, Nick Cox has obviously left; he's been replaced. You know, Darren Fletcher's been put in as the manager of the 18. So there are changes that have been made, and I don't want to say that they're starting from scratch. They're not starting from scratch, but there was a period not so long ago where United were just miles away from even the likes of Man City. And we just talked about Kobbie Mainoo. Then there was a point at which United were really, really worried that Kobbie Mainoo, even though he was a United fan, was going to end up at City, because City had a better academy and a far clearer pathway to the first team. That's changed a little bit, but I think Amorim has come in and said it still needs to be better. And it's a work in progress. It's like, I mean, we're going to get onto Amorim, and I'm going to say work in progress about 50 times. I'm going to say the same thing about the academy. There is no magic wand. You can't just click your fingers and go, right, a load of kids in the first team. you're talking about a process that takes years and years and years to get right.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me, and I completely get what you're saying, because if they're not good enough, you don't just get a free pass into the first team because you're from the academy, and I respect that. But how would it feel if you've got a really talented player in the academy and the manager's saying that? No one's got the right to be in the first team just because they're from the academy, but you look at the likes of JJ Gabriel, who you don't want to big them up too much, because you know you already get so much press at such a young age, and you don't want players getting too far ahead of themselves. But is touted to be one of the best academy players that we've had in a very, very long time. And when you see the manager maybe not being so, I don't know, forthcoming with the academy players, could maybe kind of demotivate you slightly. I don't know.
It's possible, or it goes the other way. And then you know, all those academy players are sat there going, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And the next time
that's the right mentality to have.
Well, yeah, and that's the mentality you need to make a success of yourself at Man United. To be honest, if you're listening to those comments from Ruben Amorim and going, all right, I'm going to chuck the towel in, then you're probably not going to make it at Man United anyway.
Yeah.
You know, maybe Ruben was laying the gauntlet down to those academy kids to say, right, well, I'm going to prove you. Next time you call me up to train with the first team, I'm going to show you that I deserve to be here. And you know, the JJ Gabriel one is a little bit different because what is he, 15? He's not even 16 yet, right?
Yeah, he's 15.
So, you know, as talented as he is, clearly, you know, it's a massive leap to chuck a 15-year-old into the first. I think it's a massive step already just for him to be training with the likes of Bruno Fernandes, which is only going to help him. And I also don't think that Ruben's comments were, you know, blanket about the academy. I don't think that it was aimed at every single player in the academy, because the academy coaches will tell you that they've got an awful lot of really talented boys in there. The difficulty is getting the talent at 14, 15, 16 to a point where they're still top of the age group at 19, 20, 21. You know, they're all growing, the bodies are changing. You know, you don't know if they're going to like have growth spurts, or you know how they're going to handle, you know, becoming men and the mentality around that and stuff. There's so much at play with getting these academy kids through that it is a tough business. And also, part of it is that United fans have been spoiled with this. You know, it's really, really difficult to produce one academy kid. And United really have had quite a lot. They've obviously had the class of 92, even in the squad now. You've got Mainoo, you've got Rashford, who's at Barcelona. You've got a lot of players who have come through.
McTominay.
Ballon
d'Or nominee.
All these players who have come through. It's really, really tough. And it's not just as simple as saying, right, we're going to promote a load of kids. They have to be at the right level. It's probably the hardest job in the entire club, promoting kids and getting kids ready for that step up. Because the step up, even from, you know, under 21s football to first team football is massive. You know, I don't think people really appreciate how big that jump is, and to be able to do that and immediately make an impact in the first team is massive. And just because Kobbie Mainoo was able to do it doesn't mean that everyone else is able to do it. So it's like everything at Man United. It's a work in progress. Speaking
of work in progress, I am going to ask you about Ruben Amorim, because there is a lot of mixed feelings, I would say, in the fan base. There's a lot of people that are questioning whether he's going to be able to be successful, want him to be. I would put myself in that camp, want him to be. But right now I'm not convinced. There's some people that really kind of want to just trust in the process, back him. They want to wait for him to get his players and give him a full opportunity to build a squad before fully judging them. There's some people that just aren't having him at all. I mean, what is the club stance on Ruben Amorim as of now? And do you think his job is completely secure?
I think the club want to give him at least this season. I think in their ideal world, they would qualify for Europe this year. They would give Ruben the players he needs in the summer, and then look at it seriously this time next year. So that what's that? You've got 20-odd games of next season. And if things aren't going well, at that point, you probably have to look at it and go, right, we've given this quite a lot of time. We've given him players and we've given him money to spend, or the club have spent money for him, and it's still not working. Do we need to make a change? You've mentioned that I've probably been quite supportive of him. Sometimes I think that's been mistaken for me saying I know that Ruben Amorim is the right man. I don't know. I don't know that Ruben Amorim is going to win a Premier League title for Man United, but I don't know that anyone can know that beyond doubt. What I think is that there's a lot of context that you need to add around what's happened to him at the start of his United career. I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt with some of the stuff. I think they've been an awful lot better this season as they have than they were last season. I think there are signs of progress. I wrote last night after the Bournemouth game that it can't be a coincidence that the part of the team that's functioning really well is the part that you spent 200 million quid on in the summer. They're scoring goals. I think the second highest scorers in the Premier League. That can't be a coincidence that the problems are at the back, an area of the squad that has been overlooked. Now, I'm not criticising the club for overlooking it. I think that they decided that they wanted Cunha and Mbeumo and Sesko and thought, right, we're going to fix that forward line and we'll deal with the rest later. Now, fans can listen to that and go, well, they shouldn't have done that. They should have spread the money around a bit. And I completely take that point. Maybe they should have spent the Sesko money on a midfielder. They didn't. I think the club are hoping that next summer they sign at least one central midfielder. They add more depth at wing back for Amorim, give him more of the team that he needs to be successful, and then see where they're at. I just think it's far too, with everything that's happened, with everything that he's inherited, with all the context around his start at Old Trafford, I think it's far too early to sort of say you are definitely not the right man. Now, it may turn out that he's not the right man, and that's completely fine. But I think United need to get to the point where they know beyond doubt that he isn't before they start making a change. Because I think right now, if you were to sack him today, I think you'd be doing it blind.
Do you think that he's still got the dressing room?
Yeah, I mean, there've been no indications, serious indications that he hasn't. He's made an effort to kind of unify the dressing room in terms of what he had to deal with last year. I thought it was really pointed in the summer when we sat down with him in Chicago. He said that there were things happening in the dressing room that ended up on his desk and he didn't like that. And that's why he created the leadership group with Bruno at the head of that, but also gave him 5 or 6 other people in that dressing room to deal with those issues. I think the dressing room is always going to be a problem when you're not winning every week. There's always going to be grumbles. We spoke there about Kobbie Mainoo. Is Kobbie happy with his situation at Man United? Obviously not. Same with Zagate, same with Xerxes, I imagine. So there are always these little rumbles. In terms of outright mutiny, there's been no suggestions that that's happening. The last time really that happened was under Jose, when the bulk of the dressing room got to the point where they just thought, we're just not having this guy anymore. We can't compete with him as manager. And then United had to make a change. I think that the only thing that could make United make a change before this time next year is if results completely drop off the end of a cliff, which I guess is possible, or whether the dressing room completely go. And at the moment, there's been no indication that that's the case. I think the last time I was on, I had written a story a couple of weeks before that saying that the likes of Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada, historically, their positions would have been based at Old Trafford. Now they're based at Carrington in offices. They're always walking around those communal areas. They see the players an awful lot. In one of the international breaks, not that it was a formal situation, but they had conversations with players to kind of take the temperature. They want to have their finger on the pulse of the dressing room, and they were satisfied that players that had the opportunity, if they wanted, to come to them and say, I'm not having this, and they didn't. And they took that to mean that the players were still behind the manager and behind his staff. And there's been no indication since that's changed. I think that Omar Barada in particular has made such a conscious effort not just to be a kind of a faceless executive in an office at Old Trafford. He wants to be there on the ground at Carrington so he can understand what's happening in the dressing room, in Amorim's office with all his staff, and also at the club in general. So he's got a fair idea of what's happening. And I think if he felt that there was the dressing room were tipping even slightly, that he would probably need to address that. But as things stand, as far as we understand, that he's just not had that.
Do you think they're fully committed to the 3 at the back formation, the 3-4-3 that he wants to play?
I mean,
because there was rumours he was going to switch to a 4-3-3, and people thought he was the executive sort of trying to influence.
No,
Ruben.
I don't think that there was a. No, there have been stories in the past, not with Ruben, there were stories in the past with Eric where suggestions that there'd been pressure from above to play in a certain way, and that was completely knocked back by Man United. If you're going to hire a head coach, the head coach is there to coach the players and pick the team. If you start blurring those lines, then you may as well not have a head coach. You may as well just have Jim Radcliffe come down and pick the team, which I don't think anyone wants, particularly Jim Radcliffe. So I don't think there's been any pressure in terms of how he needs to play. I think that the transition to 3-4-3 has been difficult. it's been more difficult than perhaps anyone thought it would be. I think the players have struggled, and I think, obviously when most of them play or have played under different managers in a back four with a 4-3-3, it's natural that they're going to sort of say, well, this is tough. We're struggling a little bit. I think they've got to terms with it a lot better this season than they did last year. It's obviously helped having that full pre-season and 3 weeks in between games. The problem is, again, I said this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think the biggest issue that Amorim has got is the overall quality of the squad, and in particular in certain positions. I think right now in his 3-4-3, he's got the players he's got at his disposal to a functional level where they have got a pretty good understanding of that 3-4-3 and can do it pretty well, but it's never going to be as good as it was at, say, Sporting, because he just hasn't got the profile of player that he needs. United will hope to address that in the summer with a central midfielder, someone like Elliot Anderson, possibly, the hope is that he'll give him more depth at wing back, maybe an Ahmad style wing back on the left as well as on the right, which would help obviously. And once you get those, you raise the entire level of the first team, and then you start seeing better results and more consistent results. Now that can't be indefinite. You can't just carry on down a road if there's no signs at all that it's working. And I think, if results weren't to have improved drastically this time next year, the club probably would be forced to look at maybe making a change. I just don't see that there's much point in doing that now, because I don't think that Ruben has had a fair crack at it, to be honest, with all the stuff he's had to deal with. I don't think you can properly judge what he's done, and until you can properly judge him with the players he wants, with the players he needs for that system, I just think it would be foolish to start making changes anytime soon.
Do you think the likes of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Omar Barada, the staff that he's hired to kind of make them executive decisions, when they went and got Ruben Amorim, did they go and get him for the way that he was playing, for that sort of formation? Because there has been some criticism from ex-players. Paul Scholes has been quite open about it, about how that system just isn't the Manchester United way. As much as I have doubts around Ruben Amorim because he's not convinced me so far, it wouldn't be my preferred formation, but I don't think the formation is the problem. I think that formation can play in a good way if you've got the right players. But is INEOS committed to Ruben Amorim's system in that way? That's why they went and got him?
No. I think that I don't think the system was, I don't know how to put it, I don't think the system was, I don't think they considered the system a pro. If you're doing a pro and con list, I don't think they thought, great, we want that system pro. What I think they thought is that they had Erik ten Hag, who would become very disciplinarian. The dressing room weren't particularly keen about the way that he was handling them and how he was with them, and that they went and got Ruben Amorim because of the man he is, not necessarily the coach. Now, there's obviously a lot of attractive stuff with Amorim. He'd won everywhere he'd been. He had an incredible time at Sporting and won everything, and taken them from a point where they were in crisis to the point where they were winning the Portuguese title and in the Champions League. So I think obviously that was very attractive to them. But they hired Amorim the man ahead of Amorim the coach. I think they were willing to kind of accept the 3-4-3 because they knew that they wanted Amorim and what they thought he could do for the dressing room and that group of players. Are they particularly happy with... I certainly don't think that they thought we need a coach who plays 3-4-3. I think that, you'll have read everywhere that the likes of City and Liverpool and West Ham, I think, all looked at him and thought that the 3-4-3 was a bit of a downside. I think probably Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox and Sir Jim Ratcliffe probably felt the same with Ruben, but they felt that they wanted the man rather than the coach. I think if they got rid of Ruben, I think they would probably go back to looking at someone who could play 4-3-3, because there is a bit of history with that, with United playing with wingers, and I fully accept that fans can come on here or other podcasts and things and say, well, I want my Man United team to play with flying wingers like we always did with players like Giggs and George Best and stuff. I completely get that. There is a bit of history with it. I just think in the time that United found themselves looking for a new manager, they felt it was more important to get a man manager who could connect with the players because he'd been a player himself. They wanted someone who was completely different in the way that he managed to Eric Ten Hag, and they went for that. I think they're willing to accept the 3-4-3 because they'd seen it be successful at Sporting, so we're willing to accept it. I don't think that they thought we want Ruben Amorim because he plays that way.
Interesting stuff. I mean, let's see how he gets on throughout the rest of the season. The next 2 games, I think, are going to be big for him. Aston Villa away and then Newcastle at Old Trafford.
But he deserves a bit of leeway, doesn't he? Because
leeway? He's got 2 points from Everton, West Ham and Bournemouth at Old Trafford.
But you can't. No, I appreciate that. And those results have not been good enough. And Ruben, again, if he was sat here, would tell you the same. But you can't expect the same performance level at Villa Park without Ahmad and Mbeumo. No, and it's not Ruben's fault that those players are going to AFCON. You know, United signed those players, signed Mbeumo in particular, knowing full well that in a couple of months he was going to AFCON. So you can't say we want the exact same performance level at Villa Park against a Villa team who are absolutely flying, because that's just unreasonable. You know, he's not going to be able to pick the same team.
I hope De Ligt or Maguire's back. I don't think Maguire's back. Yeah, is he? I think it's looking
De Ligt's a funny one because Ruben said initially that he thought that was a small injury and that he wouldn't miss very much, and he missed 2 games now, and unless he gives
he's missed 3, hasn't he?
3. A more positive update when we speak to him on Friday. You know, we really need him back for the Villa and Newcastle games in particular, because they are 2 massive games. I think it's going to be really, really tough for United losing Mbeumo and Ahmad and Mazraoui, because essentially you've had your whole right side of the team ripped out, and that's probably why he's looking, or has been looking at maybe switching to a back 4, because with those players gone, you know, maybe he feels like he can't play that 3-4-3 anymore, and for a couple of games at least, he's going to have to go to a back 4, because that's the system that the players he's got left suit.
Do you think, when you talk about the centre-backs there, because it has been a huge miss not having De Ligt, and Maguire, I've got to say, I think Maguire comes into that category as well. Do you think that's a position United will target?
I think it's possible. I mean, they would probably have to get rid of a few, because it's the one area of the squad that is probably overstocked. They've got Yoro, Maguire, De Ligt, Mazraoui, Aiden Heaven. They've got, in terms of numbers, that's probably the one area where they're all right. They probably do need to get rid of a few of them. Obviously, there's an issue with Maguire's future. I think there probably should be an issue with Shaw's as well, about whether you keep him or whether he gets to go. I think if you can get a few out the door, then most definitely it'll be an area that they'll look to strengthen, because we've seen in the last couple of games, you know, it only takes a couple of injuries before you have to pair Yoro and Aiden Heaven together. You know, Aiden Heaven, in terms of Premier League experience, has got barely any. Lenny Yoro is what, 21? And you're talking about really young guys having to play an awful lot of Premier League minutes, which is just not how United envisaged it. There are so many areas of the squad that need improved. Again, that's another reason why I just think that you need to give Ruben Amorim at least another summer transfer window, because at the moment he's doing the best. In my opinion, he's doing the best with what he's got, and what he's got is not good enough to be where he thinks United should be.
Yeah, no, I take that on board. I do take that on board. We need a better squad for him to utilise, and especially if you're looking towards European football next season. I mean, I actually think 1 game a week's been probably more of a hindrance than a help for us, but also I think if playing 2, we just don't have the squad for it right now. Don't have the
squad. I mean, the 1 game a week thing is interesting, because immediately everyone goes, oh, it's a massive advantage, and it is an advantage. I don't think it's as big an advantage as people maybe believe, because if you ask Pep Guardiola about 1 game a week, he would say it's important to have game every 3 days for rhythm. What he doesn't like is when there's no gaps at all in that, you know, when it's a game every 3 days for 6 months. He doesn't mind having 3 games a week, because it keeps players in rhythm. At the moment, you know, United are playing, they're getting a couple of days off, they're back in training, and then they've got to kind of start all over again. Now, again, I'm not making excuses, because it is an advantage to have that rest and recovery time compared to the teams that are in Europe, obviously. I just don't think that it's as big an advantage as perhaps people think. And you're right, you know, if they are going to get back into Europe, they're going to need a far bigger squad. They should be looking at players like Mark Gay at Crystal Palace, Semenyo at Bournemouth. You know, United, whether they're going to get those players or not, those are big opportunities for United, and they have to be looking, you know, they have to be there or thereabouts with those opportunities, because it is going to be tough to sign players and improve the squad in the way they want, because there are so many other clubs interested in the same players.
Yeah, just lastly, do you think they are going to continue to go down that Premier League proven route? I know Sesko wasn't in that bracket, sort of maybe different style of play there. I actually thought he looked pretty good when he came on yesterday, but you know, Mbeumo and Cunha both done pretty well so far, and they're Premier League proven. And you know, you talk about Mark Gay, I'd absolutely love to go for him. Semenyo has been heavily linked to in January. Whether we'll have the money to pull it off, whether it is a priority sort of position, do you think they'll continue down that route? And just to kind of touch on again, where do you think the priorities will be in terms of positions?
I think they would like to go down that Premier League proven route because they've shown with Cunha and Mbeumo that they are able to come in and make an impact straight away. Sesko has come from Germany and has taken a little bit longer to adapt. Obviously, it's not been helped with injuries, but you can kind of see the difference between signing a guy from the Bundesliga, a young guy, and having Cunha and Mbeumo who have come in and just adapted straight away. So if they can do that, I'm sure that's what they'll be looking at, and that's why they've been linked with Semenyo and Guéhi and Elliot Anderson and Blaber and all these players who've been in the Premier League before, because we've seen in the past, they sign players from abroad for big money and they're just not adapted. So if they can do that, I'm sure that they will. I think what you'll see is a mixture of Premier League proven players in that age bracket of between sort of 24 and 27, and then younger players likes of Aiden Heaven, Sesko, those kind of 19, 20, 21-year-olds who can come in, who they feel they can get for a decent price, who have got a big ceiling and they can improve at Man United. Again, the difficulty with those Premier League proven players is that everyone wants them. That list of players that I've just given you. Guéhi is wanted by absolutely everyone in the Premier League and in Europe. Elliot Anderson is wanted by Man City. Man City again want Semenyo. Semenyo's been linked with Liverpool. So there is an awful lot of competition. And United, United fans aren't going to want to hear this. United aren't the same pull as they were 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's still a great club and one of the biggest clubs in the world, and there is a chance to be part of something really special here, because if they can get it right and you win the Premier League, imagine being part of that United team that win the first Premier League title since Sir Alex Ferguson left. That would be absolutely fantastic for those players. But if you're looking to win trophies right away, where do you go? You go to City and Arsenal and Liverpool and probably Chelsea ahead of Man United, and that's difficult to take. In terms of
maybe not Arsenal.
Well, maybe not. in terms of the areas of the squad they're looking at, the priority is to sign a central midfielder, at least one. I don't think it will be two £100 million players. I think they would spend £100 million on one player and maybe 40 to 50 on another. A João Gomez type from Wolves, who should be available because Wolves are obviously going to get relegated. In terms of other areas, again, the message from United is that they want to give Ruben more depth at wing back. They don't feel like he's got the depth. You've got a situation where you've had Dalot playing on the right and on the left. Dorgu came in January, has struggled a little bit and is now can't get in the team. You've got Mazraoui, who's playing at centre back and then sometimes at wing back. You've got
more of a centre half, I think, in that system.
You've got Luke Shaw, who probably can't fulfil that wing back role anymore just because of how much, how intense it is. He's probably more of a centre half now. So ideally, they would like to sign or give Ruben more depth at wing back. You mentioned there about having an Ahmad style on the left like they do on the right. I imagine that would be quite high up on their priority list. It's just about getting the targets through the door. And also, it will depend on how United finish the season, whether they're in Europe or not, whether United have done well enough for Ruben to get really, really a proper backing, which I think they should do. But if they struggle between now and the end of the season and Ruben is his position is a little bit shaky, it gives the club a difficult decision then. Do we go all in on Ruben Amorim, given all these players that he wants, knowing that maybe in 6 months we might have to be looking to make a change, and then we get another manager in who goes, oh, that guy that you signed in the summer for 60 million, I don't like him, so he can go and I need someone else. That's the last thing the club need, because ultimately then you're starting from scratch again.
Let's see what happens. Look, it's been such an insightful interview. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll be talking about Ruben Amorim still being Manchester United manager and being successful.
You say this every time we finish.
In the future.
Every time we finish one of these, you say hopefully next time we'll be talking about
United
being
hopefully
successful.
we will.
I agree. Fingers crossed. I do think that he is the right man, that he deserves a bit more backing from some Man United fans. I think that if he gets the players he needs, I really, really hope, and I think he will. I think he will get it right. I
hope so. I like him.
He's a good guy, and whatever you feel about Ruben Amorim, he wants Man United to be successful. He absolutely lives and breathes that job, and ultimately, that's all you can ask for as Man United manager. He's desperate for Man United to do well. That's all he wants, and I do think that maybe some of the criticism has been a little bit harsh. I think that maybe we need to add a bit more context about what's happened and what he's inherited. Hopefully, when it all kind of settles down and sorts itself out, gets a good summer window, qualifies for Europe, and we'll be sat here this time next year with United top of the Premier League.
Love it. Thank you so much. We can only dream. Thank you everyone for watching as well. Get your comments in down below. What do you think? Make sure you smash a like on the video, and we will see you on the next one.